Today in our 2016 Hyundai Santa Fe, we're going to be taking a look at and installing the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness with 4-pole flat trailer connector, part number C56184. So here's what our 4-pole looks like when it's fully installed. And as you can see, we have more than enough wire to hook up from our vehicle to our trailer. And whenever we do get ready, just have a little bit of wire hanging out, close the hatch, avoiding the latch part of it, and we can hook up to our trailer right here. Now when we're not getting ready to tow or we're not using our wiring, can actually stow it in our spare tool tire compartment right here. We can close the lid, and now it's going to live inside our vehicle away from any of the elements that may cause any corrosion problems. So here's everything our kit's going to come with. It's going to come with our 4-pole flat, connect to our control box, as well as the T-connectors that are going to hook up to our taillights, a charge line that we're going to run to our battery, a dust cover for our 4-pole, a fuse holder, as well as all the connectors and ties and the fuse, and a little bit of silicone to seal up the entry point for our wires. Our module box here is going to protect our vehicle's lighting and wiring system. If we have a problem on our trailer side, it's going to prevent any feedback and prevent any damage to our vehicle. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's show you how we get it installed. To begin our installation, we're going to need to get into our cargo area. We're going to need to come in and we're going to remove everything out of this section. I'm going to pull my spare tire tools out and set them aside. When we pull our spare tire tools out, underneath the tray here, we're going to have 4 small tabs that we're going to pop out. One on the far right, one closer to the center, another one on the left-hand side, and then one on the far left. I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver and pop those covers out. Now underneath our covers, we're going to have 4 Phillips head screws, or you can use a 10mm socket. Okay, now with the screws removed, we can go ahead and pull our cargo pocket out, and we're going to set it aside for safekeeping. Our next step is going to be removing our threshold, and if we just come to the end here and we grab and give it a nice pull, it's going to pop the clips out, releasing it. So we're just going to work our way down the side. Just going to pop these clips out. Now we are going to have a Phillips screw on each side underneath our threshold, and we're going to go ahead and remove that as well. Now if we come to our taillight, we're going to have 2 tabs, and our hardware holding our taillight in place is going to be in there. If we come to the top, we're just going to work a screwdriver behind that small tab, and it's going to push down out of the way. Our taillights are held in by 2 Phillips head screws. We'll go ahead and pull those out. Then we can remove our taillight. We're just going to kind of wiggle it back and forth, and then once we can get a hold of it, pull straight back. At our connection point, we can go ahead and push down on that tab right there, and we should be able to wiggle our connector, and it should let go. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this grommet out of the spot. The reason why is because we're actually going to have our wires come from the inside and run through here, and that's where the silicone is going to come into play. So we can now move back into the cargo area and start pulling our panels down so we can get access. So right about the line of the tail light, I'm going to take my weather stripping and I'm going to pull it away just a little bit so I can have some room to get to this panel section right here. I'm going to be using a trim panel tool. I'm just going to reach in and start popping the clips that are holding it in place. Where we have enough room to get back to our grommet back here. So with everything opened up, and our panel pulled away on our driver's side, we're going to move to our passenger side and do the same thing, removing our taillight and pulling our panel away, giving us access to get back to our taillight harness. Now we're going to take the yellow, red, and brown wire end with our T-connector, and this is me going to our driver's side. So if we pull our panel back, we're going to reach in and feed our T-connector through the grommet that we just pulled out behind our taillight. We can go ahead and connect our T-connector to our factory harness, but before we do, I'm going to put a little bit of dielectric grease. It's always a good idea to put a little bit in any of your electrical connectors to help keep out moisture and any corrosion buildup. Now if you don't have any, you can pick some up on our website using part number 11755. Just going to take a little bit, put it on my connector just like that. We can go ahead and plug everything in. Now we can bring our attention back to the grommet. I'm going to cut a small slit in the grommet so I can feed my wires right here through, and then come back with some silicone and seal it all back up, giving it a little bit more protection. Now before we put our grommet and everything back into place, I'm going to take my charge wire and I'm going to run it backwards into my taillight, and I'm going to have it come out where the rest of my harness is, because we're going to need to hook this up to the black wire on our control box. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this in. I can come around and reach in and grab the wire and pull it out. So here's the black wire that I ran through, and here's the black wire that's connected to my control box. Now I'm going to strip back the end of the wire. I'm going to go ahead and attach these using the included yellow butt connector in the kit. And we can put the other end in and crimp it down as well. Now before we button everything up here on our driver's side, we're going to go ahead and run the wire over to our passenger side. That way we know we have enough slack and if we have to make any adjustments of where we mount everything. So we're going to take the green wire and I'm going to run it along where my threshold would go. I'm going to come over to my passenger side. I'm going to go ahead and pull this panel back and feed it through the hole where I pulled my grommet out. Next, we're going to need to find a spot to mount our module box. Now they did provide us with some double-sided foam tape. So I'm going to go ahead and take the backing off one side, put it on my module box, pushing down, making sure it makes good contact. And I think I'm going to route my box right behind my panel here on the lower portion. That way it's out of the way, but it's not going to affect any of the clips holding my panel on. So we can go ahead and pull the other side of the backing off. I'm going to pull my panel away. I'm just going to feed it down right here. Push against the body so it makes good connection. And then now we need to find a suitable location for our ground wire. Now our ground wire is just going to have to connect to something metal. So I think right here on the lower part of our threshold would be a good spot. It's close to our control box and it's going to be covered up. I'm going to be using one of the provided self-tapping screws from our kit, and I'm just going to screw it right into the body here. Next, we're going to need to get our charge wire up to our battery. Now in order to do that, I'm going to feed my wire down here through my bumper and come out the bottom. But before I do that, to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to take a piece of airline tube that I had laying around and I'm going to feed it through. That way I can attach my wire to the other end and pull it down. Now if you don't have any airline tube, you can use whatever you have laying around, coat hanger, or anything that's going to keep its shape when you push it through. I'm going to take the end of my wire here, I'm going to feed it in to my airline tube. I'm going to take a little bit of electrical tape just for some added security so when I start pulling, I don't lose my wire. So here's my airline tube where it came out at the bottom. I'm just going to start pulling it through until I have all the slack pulled out of my charge wire. Now I need to run my wire up to the front of my vehicle, so I'm going to get it ran and then I'll show you how I did it. Just one thing to keep in mind is you want to stay away from any heat sources like your exhaust or any moving parts that'll damage your wire. So I ran my wire here, tying it to a few factory electrical connections. I came back, went over the axle, then over my filler tube for my fuel line. Then I came down, except tying it along the way. Then I went underneath this cover here, right in front of my evap canister, and I tucked it underneath, and then finally it comes out right here. Now we're going to move up to the engine bay and use the same technique that we got the wire down through our bumper. We're going to fish wire an airline tube down. I'm going to route my airline tube as close to the battery as I can, making sure I'm going to stay away from any heat sources or any moving parts, and then route it down to my wire down underneath. Just going to put my charge wire, feed it into the end of it, secure it with a little bit of electrical tape, and then we can go back up and pull it up to our battery. We're going to strip back the end of our charge wire here. We're going to take another one of the included butt connectors in our kit, and we're going to go ahead and crimp it on. On the other end of our butt connector, we're going to connect one end of our fuse holder. And they're already pre-stripped, so we're going to take the end, insert it in, and crimp it down. Finally, on the other end that's still open on our fuse holder, we're going to take the provided ring terminal and crimp that in place. Now we're going to hook this ring terminal up to the positive side of our battery. So if we open up the cover, using a 10mm socket, I want to loosen up this nut right here. I'm going to put my ring terminal on. I'm going to replace my nut and tighten it back up. And finally, we can put in our fuse into our fuse holder, close the cover up, and we can start tidying up some of our wires. Now, since our cover doesn't fully close, I'm just going to cut a small notch right here in the cover so that it'll give us room to go over the wire here. And you can use pretty much anything. I'm just using a pair of pliers here because it is just plastic. So whatever you have that'll cut through the plastic, and just trim as needed so that you can fit your cover down over the wire and connector. With everything taken care of in the front, we can go ahead and come back to the back side of our vehicle and start putting everything back together. Now on each side, we're going to take our grommet and we're going to cut a slit in our grommet, allowing us to put the wire in the middle. That way we can replace our grommet, put it back into position. And now I'm going to come back and I'm actually going to get a little bit of silicone and I'm going to fill it up. And they did provide a small tube of silicone in the kit. And I'm just going to fill up the part that I cut and a little bit around the edge, giving it a little bit more protection. Now we're going to do this on both sides of our vehicle. Now on the driver's side, we did find it easier if we cut a slit for each one of our wires, since we do have so much more on the driver's side than we do on the passenger side. But once we get our wires through our grommet and the holes cut, we'll get our grommet back into position, and then we can fill it up with some silicone. So then we can go ahead and plug our taillights back into place. And we can push it into position. And we're going to replace our hardware. Now we can go ahead and put our passenger side taillight in as well. We can go ahead and start putting our panels back into place. We're just going to line up the holes. We can start replacing our hardware as well. Once we have our panels in place, we can start putting our weather stripping back in place as well. Now we can get ready to install our threshold. But before we do, you want to make sure that your green wire is out of the way of all your fasteners that are going to be connecting down and the latch for the hatch. Now I'm just going to take it and I'm going to push my wire down behind the support here. That way it's not going to interfere with anything. We can line up our threshold. And snap it into place. I'm going to take our 4-pole wire and I'm going to drape it outside the car. That way I can put this on top of it and our 4-pole will be ready whenever we need it. Once we get this in place, then we can just go ahead and reinstall all the fasteners that we took out. Put our spare tire tools back. Now we all have left is put our 4-pole down here and attach our dust cover. Now we can leave our 4-pole wire right here and we'll be in with our spare tools, and whenever we need it, we can go ahead and grab it and pull it out. And with everything hooked up, now would be a good time to make sure to test it and make sure everything's working. To do our test, we have a 4-pole tester here, and if you don't have one, you can pick one up on our website using part number I26. Now with an extra set of hands, I'm going to have them run into the vehicle and start running my lights. So we can see here that we have our running lights and they're working properly, as well as the left turn signal, the right turn signal, and the brakes. Now just to make sure that everything is working properly, we're going to go ahead and check the left turn signal while the brakes are applied, and finally the right turn signal when the brakes are applied. Looks like everything's working well. And that'll finish up the look at the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness, part number C56184 on our 2016 Hyundai Santa Fe.
Click the link below to shop, learn more, or visit us at etrailer.com.